Prince Harry. Let's give him a round of applause. At last, he has taken his children to see their granddad.
Does this put us in a situation where there is a constitutional crisis?
This has been an extraordinarily disastrous week.
Because for years we heard that the obstacle that was standing between Harry, Meghan, and these children was the UK thing around security. It just wasn't going to be safe. What changed?
There isn't a laundry in the cosmos big enough to wash all the dirty linen he has aired about his own family. For him to complain about his privacy being invaded takes not just the biscuit, but the whole tin.
The moment that door opened at Highgrove, something else slammed shut somewhere else in England, and nobody inside that house said it out loud. But everyone felt it because Prince William didn't just miss that gathering, he stayed away on purpose. And the more you look at the timing, the silence, the carefully chosen words, the more it stops looking like a scheduling conflict and starts looking like a line drawn so sharply it can't be erased. Because here's the part people are whispering about behind palace walls. This wasn't just a reunion. This wasn't just a grandfather meeting his grandchildren after years of distance. This was something arranged, something negotiated, something that insiders are now calling a private understanding. And once that understanding was in place, everything changed. Not slowly, instantly. No photos, no official smiles, no staged balcony moment, just 4 words, a private family occasion, and somehow those 4 words feel louder than any public announcement ever could.
To assess it calmly. And this is going to be my views. I'm not saying that anyone else is right or wrong, but this is personally how I feel about this entire situation. King Charles is a grandfather who, despite everything that's happened, knows that his grandchildren are completely innocent in all of their parents' actions, and he wants to meet them. I've met a few people in my lifetime that have had to put up with certain people that have married into their family, for example, or even a family member, because they want to see the rest of the family if there's children involved. I've seen this happen where grandparents have to put up with a daughter or son's spouse because they know that if they say anything, they will not get to see their grandchildren. I believe that King Charles is 77 years old, that he has cancer, and it seems that it's not the curable kind, and he was the one that finally facilitated having this meet-up with them. Now, are Harry and Meghan doing it for good reasons, for pure of heart reasons? Highly unlikely. Are Harry and Meghan finally putting their children first and putting the king's feelings first? Again, highly unlikely. Do I think that Harry and Meghan have suddenly had a change of heart and they've stopped all their conniving and plotting? Does a leopard change its spots? Again, highly unlikely.
Because when something is this controlled, this sealed, this carefully hidden, it raises a question nobody in that palace wants to answer. What exactly was agreed inside that room? And this is where the story twists. Because sources aren't just talking about a reunion anymore, they're hinting at a deal. Not written down, not announced, but understood. More access, more time, more presence for Meghan's children in the king's life. And if that's true, if even part of that is true, then William wasn't just absent, he was reacting.
From William and Catherine, and to get some insight into the work of the real royals. But what I think is so interesting is that William was playing polo when news came out that Harry, Meghan, and the children met with the king and the queen at Highgrove. So everyone is asking the same question: what changed? Because for years we heard that the obstacle that was standing between Harry, Meghan, and these children was the UK thing around security. It just wasn't going to be safe. And Harry said that he could not bring his family back without the protection that he actually felt was necessary. But now I want you to imagine this. So if Meghan and Harry and these children are able to come back, and if they're able to walk through those palace doors and then sit down privately with the king and queen, because at first I heard that the queen was not going to see Harry, but now we're hearing that the queen was there as well. And many people are actually going to ask, was security really the only thing that was keeping the family apart? Was that really truly the issue?
You have to understand the history to feel the weight of this moment, because this isn't just about one afternoon in Gloucestershire. This is about years of fracture, years of accusations, years of trust collapsing piece by piece until nothing solid was left. And now suddenly, after everything that's been said and done, the door opens again, but only for some. And the question becomes impossible to ignore. Who decided that? Because while Charles is being described as a grandfather reaching out, there's another narrative forming underneath, one that doesn't get spoken in press releases, one that lives in quiet conversations and careful wording. And it says this: if Charles made a promise, if Charles quietly agreed to rebuild that connection with Meghan's children, then he did it knowing exactly how William would see it. And William didn't just disagree. He stepped back. Picture it clearly.
Or was there something much deeper that was happening? And this is where King Charles finds himself in an almost impossible position. He really does. But I have a counter to that. But here is the situation, because there is Charles. He is a father, okay? But he is also the king. He is also the king. And the father side of all of this looks at Harry, his son, and he's like, okay, I need to see my son. He's thinking, okay, I've done some things, and Harry has given his dad a hard time about a lot of things around the marriage of Diana and Charles. And so there is this guilt that Charles, I think, feels with Harry, that he tries to, I think, play into Harry's woes, okay? And now we have Harry with his children, and then there is this desire for, I think, the king to want to feed into this relationship to help repair it, because Harry, I believe, has put a big guilt trip on his father. But then you have the public who are looking at this and saying, well, we remember all of the interviews. We remember all of the accusations. I wrote a song, do you remember? Okay? We remember the books, because I want people to remember, right? They're the documentaries, the Oprah interview. We can't forget that also Meghan accused the king and Catherine of being the royal racist. And we saw how sneaky they said it vicariously through that book Endgame with the Omid guy, okay, the Scooby-Doo guy, okay? So you ain't slick, Meghan. So we know that the king has been pushed under a bus, and it's been by Meghan. But what is also interesting is that Meghan, they are saying she's the one that leaked the meeting of the king with Harry and Meghan and the children.
Because this is where everything becomes almost symbolic. On one side, a closed-door meeting filled with history, tension, and something that feels dangerously close to reconciliation. On the other side, a future king standing in public, carrying on as if none of it exists, refusing to step into a room he once would have walked into without hesitation. That contrast isn't accidental. It's a message. And the more people dig into it, the more it feels like William isn't just protecting himself, he's protecting something bigger, something institutional, something that doesn't bend easily just because emotions shift in a single afternoon. Because what happens if that private deal becomes something more? What happens if those children, once kept at a distance, slowly become part of the picture again? And what happens to the structure William is preparing to inherit if that line starts to blur? There's a reason timing matters so much in this family, and this timing feels almost too precise to ignore, because everything surrounding this meeting, Harry's legal struggles, the ongoing security battles, the sudden shift from distance to access creates a pattern that feels less like coincidence and more like strategy. And that's where the whispers get louder, because some believe this wasn't just about family, it was about leverage, a moment of vulnerability, a moment of opportunity, a moment where emotion and position collided and something was quietly exchanged in the middle of it. And William saw it coming, which explains why his reaction doesn't feel impulsive, it feels calculated, almost pre-decided, as if this was a scenario he had already prepared for long before that door at Highgrove ever opened. Because when trust breaks at this level, it doesn't come back with a handshake or a shared meal, it comes back slowly or not at all. And for William, this might not be about anger anymore. It might be about control, because once a private deal is made at the top, once access is expanded without full alignment, once the rules start shifting quietly behind closed doors, it raises a question that cuts deeper than any family disagreement. Who is really steering the future now? And if that answer isn't clear, if that answer isn't unified, that, then what happened at Highgrove wasn't just a reunion, it was the beginning of something far more complicated. Something that doesn't end with one meeting. Something that doesn't stay private forever. And here is where the story stops pretending to be about one afternoon and starts revealing itself as something far more calculated. Because the silence that followed that Highgrove meeting wasn't peaceful. It was loaded, it was strategic, and it was filled with the kind of unanswered questions that don't fade away quietly. They build, they spread, and they begin to shape what happens next. Because while King Charles may have walked away from that private gathering feeling like a bridge had finally been rebuilt, Prince William walked away from the same moment without even being there. And somehow, that absence said more than any appearance ever could. The reality that insiders are now circling around is uncomfortable because it suggests that what happened inside Highgrove didn't just stay inside Highgrove, it shifted expectations, it redrew boundaries, and it may have quietly signaled that the rules surrounding Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, Archie and Lilibet are no longer as fixed as they once seemed, and if those rules are changing without full alignment at the top, then the tension between King Charles and Prince William isn't just personal, it's structural, it's foundational, and it's dangerously close to becoming irreversible. Because think about what it means if a private understanding was reached, even informally, even emotionally. Because in a family like this, informal agreements have a way of becoming permanent realities, especially when they involve access, visibility, and the next generation. And once that door is opened, even slightly, it becomes almost impossible to close it again without consequences that ripple far beyond one relationship. And that is exactly where Prince William's reaction starts to make a different kind of sense. Because stepping back suddenly looks less like stubbornness and more like containment, like an attempt to stop something from expanding before it's fully understood. At the same time, the public narrative continues to drift towards something softer, something easier to accept, because the image of King Charles reconnecting with grandchildren is powerful, it's emotional, it's human, and it pulls attention away from the harder question sitting underneath it, which is whether that moment came with conditions, with expectations, with promises that were never meant to be spoken outside that room. And the more this story is framed as reconciliation, the less anyone is forced to confront the possibility that it might actually be negotiation. And then there's the timing again. Because timing refuses to stay quiet in this story, it keeps showing up like a clue that doesn't want to be ignored. Because everything surrounding that meeting, the legal pressure, the public scrutiny, the shifting narrative around relevance and position creates an environment where every decision carries weight, where every gesture can be interpreted as more than just emotion, and where even a private dinner can feel like a move on a much larger board. This is where the divide becomes impossible to smooth over, because King Charles is being pulled towards something deeply personal, something that exists outside the institution, something that says family should come first no matter the cost, while Prince William is being pulled in the opposite direction, toward stability, toward consistency, toward a version of the monarchy that doesn't shift based on individual relationships. And when those two directions collide, there is no easy compromise, there is only distance. And that distance is starting to look intentional, because every choice made after that meeting feels like it's reinforcing a position rather than softening it, and that raises a question that refuses to settle down. Because if this was truly about healing, wouldn't there be some visible step forward, some shared moment, some signal that both sides are moving in the same direction? Instead, what we're seeing is separation, controlled, deliberate, and quietly sustained. Even more telling is what isn't being said, because in a situation this sensitive, silence becomes its own form of communication. And the lack of clarification, the absence of denial, the careful avoidance of specifics all point towards something that hasn't been fully resolved, something that is still evolving behind closed doors, and something that may not settle into a clear outcome anytime soon. And when a story refuses to settle, it usually means one thing: it isn't finished. Because the truth is, this isn't just about a single decision or a single meeting, it's about momentum, about where things are heading, about whether that private deal, whatever it was, becomes the foundation for something bigger or the trigger for something that fractures even further. And at this point, both possibilities feel equally real, equally likely, and equally unstable. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all, because for every version of this story that suggests reconciliation, there's another version that suggests repositioning. And those two versions cannot exist comfortably side by side forever. Not in a family where every move is magnified, where every relationship carries public weight, and where the future isn't just personal, it's constitutional. So the question lingers, heavier now than it did before that door ever opened at Highgrove. Because once something shifts at that level, it doesn't quietly return to where it was, it keeps moving, it keeps changing, and it keeps pulling everyone involved further into whatever comes next.